Hi, I'm Aileen, and 4 days before my wedding, my sister poured red wine on my gown, then called it a mistake. They said I didn't belong in couture, said my taste was aspirational at best. They mocked my name, cut my voice from the ceremony, replaced my speech with one I never wrote. And when I sat down at my own rehearsal dinner, the slideshow played like I was never born. But I smiled. I stayed quiet, because I wasn't planning a wedding anymore. I was preparing a counterattack. What kind of family sets your ex at the VIP table, then labels your seat Mrs. Wrong? And what do you do when you realize they weren't just sabotaging the event, they were trying to erase you? Would you still walk down that aisle? Or would you walk out and rewrite every line they gave you? The sun was too cheerful for what that brunch turned out to be. I pulled up to my mother's driveway in San Diego, the kind of upper-middle-class neighborhood where every mailbox matched the shutters and the grass looked aggressively trimmed. The kind of place that screamed composure, but never warmth. Garrett wasn't invited. "He's not family yet," my mom had said. "This is just us girls finalizing details." Details. That word had started to sound like a threat. Inside, the kitchen table was already crowded with plates of fruit, mimosas half drunk, and voices 2 octaves too high to be sincere. My sister, Seraphine, was seated dead center, like the queen of some lifestyle magazine spread. Her smile was perfect, and perfectly false. "Oh, there she is!" she sang out when I stepped in. "The bride herself!" There was a pause, like everyone was waiting to see how I'd respond. I smiled and sat down quietly. No one asked me what I wanted to drink. The conversation floated around guest lists and chair colors. I stayed silent until my mother asked what style of dress I'd picked. "It's minimal," I said. "Ivory crepe, vintage lace along the sleeves, open back, very clean lines." That's when Seraphine leaned slightly toward Aunt Ophelie and whispered, "Loud enough. That sounds like something you'd find in the clearance bin at Walmart." Laughter, stifled but real. I felt it land like cold metal in my chest. My fork paused midair, but I didn't look at her. I'd heard that tone before, back in high school when she joked about me wearing my emotions like hand-me-downs. At my college graduation, when she told a stranger my major was being difficult, with a minor in poor taste. She thought it was a game, and everyone else played along, laughing because it was easier than calling her out. Delora, my mother, chuckled, eyes darting between us. "Seraphine," she murmured, like a warning. But there was no real defense in her voice. "I mean, maybe tone it down a little, sweetie," Ophelie added, tapping her mimosa glass. "We wouldn't want guests thinking it's a thrift store theme." Everyone laughed again. Except me. I thought of my first job interview, the blazer Seraphine had called a shoulder-padded apology, of the shoes I wore to my promotion party that she said looked like a clearance regret. It wasn't about fashion. It was always about shrinking me, just enough to fit the mold they'd built for me. Quiet, grateful, accepting of scraps dressed as affection. I took a slow breath. Let it pass. Later, as we cleared the table, Seraphine sidled up beside me, bumping her shoulder into mine. "Hey," she said, voice syrupy. "Don't be so sensitive. You know I'm just kidding. That dress is brave." Brave. Like I was doing something dangerous just by not choosing glitter and rhinestones. I smiled, the kind that stops short of your eyes. "Of course," I said. "You've always had a way with compliments." She blinked, maybe caught off guard for a second, then laughed and walked away like she'd won something. She didn't know, none of them did, that I'd stopped caring about their validation years ago. What I cared about now was memory and documentation. Back in my car, I pulled out my phone, opened a note, and started typing. April 2nd, Seraphine, Walmart clearance comment, Ophelie co-signed. Delora stayed silent. I stared at the screen for a moment, then added, "Same pattern, new date." They thought I'd laugh it off like before. Thought I'd wear shame like another borrowed dress. But this time, I wasn't folding. I wasn't planning revenge. Not exactly. But I was building something. They won't see it coming. 2 days after the brunch, I found myself standing outside my mother's front door again, this time for what she called a planning tea. There was no explanation of who would be there, no confirmation of the agenda, just a vague, clipped text that said, "Pop by for a quick wedding update, 2 p.m. sharp." The door opened before I could knock. Seraphine was already in hostess mode, floating around in a pastel pantsuit like she'd stepped out of a lifestyle blog. She air-kissed my cheek and gestured me into the dining room, where Ophélie was already flipping through fabric swatches, and Delora sat nodding with a glass of rosé in hand. "Glad you could make it," Seraphine said. "We're just finalizing some things." Some things. I took the seat furthest from her and laid out my folder. Pictures of the veil I loved, the kitten heels I had already bought, a swatch of lace I'd saved from my gown's first fitting. "I wanted to share the final accessories I chose," I began, keeping my tone even. "I thought they would complement the neckline." Seraphine barely glanced up. "We've actually been talking about trimming the train a little. Mom thought the cathedral length might make you look shorter on the aisle." Delora sipped her wine without comment, like that was confirmation enough. Before I could respond, Ophélie chimed in. "And I already spoke to the seamstress about softening the sleeves, remember? Just a gentle flutter instead of that rigid line." I blinked. "I don't remember agreeing to any of that." Seraphine smiled, tight and polished. "Oh, honey, you were probably too busy. It's hard to juggle everything, we get it." I nodded slowly, not because I agreed, but because it was the only move that wouldn't explode the moment. I'd learned the hard way what happened when I challenged the choreography of their decisions. I became the ungrateful one, the drama, the problem child. So I stayed quiet. For now. Later that evening, I returned home to Garrett's apartment. I was still replaying the conversation in my head when he handed me his phone. "Someone forwarded me this," he said. "No idea who." It was a screenshot, a group chat, title, wedding team, members, Seraphine, Ophélie, Delora. Not me. I scrolled through the messages, each line pulling tighter at something inside my chest. If she insists on those wildflowers again, I swear I'll scream. Let's not ask her about table decor anymore. We're doing blush and gold. Keep her out of floral. She has no taste. There was even a photo I'd taken at the florist, shared with the caption, "Aileen thinking she's a vision board queen." I stared at the screen. My hands didn't shake. My eyes didn't water. Something deeper than that settled in. A clean, quiet fracture. "Who sent this?" I asked. Garrett shrugged. "Anonymous number. Maybe someone on the team who doesn't like being part of a hit squad." I handed the phone back. "I won't say anything yet." He looked at me like he wanted to push, but he didn't. He knew me well enough by now. "You want me to step in?" "No," I said. "Let them think I'm still quiet." That night, I opened the Notes app on my phone and started a new entry. Planning tea, April 4th. Ophélie changed sleeves. Seraphine said I looked short. Group chat excludes bride. Mockery documented. It was no longer about the dress, or the flowers, or the music. It was about control, ownership, and their need to reframe my wedding into a statement about themselves. Before bed, I checked my email to confirm my next fitting with the seamstress. As I scanned the thread, my eyes caught a CC line I hadn't noticed before. SeraphineDoraBlushConcepts.com. And just like that, I knew it wasn't about opinions. It was about control. I woke before the sun had properly settled into the windows. The kind of morning where the quiet feels like a warning more than a peace offering. My head was still pounding with the echo of that group chat, those swatches, the sideways smirks masked as style notes. I rolled out of bed, made coffee without sugar, and sat down with my laptop, still in my robe. Something in me couldn't rest. There was a loose thread in the fabric of everything they were doing, and I needed to pull it. The seamstress had emailed 2 days ago, confirmation of the final design for my dress. I hadn't opened it yet. Part of me didn't want to. Part of me was afraid of what I'd see. I clicked. The PDF opened. It wasn't my dress. The sketch looked similar on the surface, ivory, fitted, lace, but the details were off. The hem was shorter, the neckline higher, the sleeves different. Not enough to alert a stranger. But to me, it was a different dress entirely, one I hadn't approved. I scrolled down. Notes written in the margins in soft gray font. Adjust for body length, per SD direction. SD. I scrolled further. There it was. CC. SeraphineDoraBlushConcepts.com. I wasn't angry. Not yet. My fingers hovered over the keys as I crafted my response to the seamstress. Please revert to my original sketch. No further changes authorized. Confirm receipt. Then I hit forward, sending the original email to myself. I changed the subject line to, "When it started." Because this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was step 3 in a very carefully choreographed campaign. By mid-morning, I'd shifted into something cleaner, more neutral. Black slacks, gray sweater, no makeup. I needed air, so I stepped outside to walk around the block. The apartment complex was too quiet. Even the birds felt like they were watching. When I came back, Garrett was sitting at the kitchen counter, phone in hand, eyebrows raised. "Did you see this?" I took the phone. The screen showed a picture message, an elegant wedding invite in gold foil print, set against marble-patterned cardstock. Except the name on it wasn't mine. It read, "Lena Clarkston and Garrett Hoyle cordially invite you." "Who sent this?" I asked, feeling the chill behind my knees. "Rachel from college. She thought it was a typo, but figured you'd laugh about it." I didn't laugh. I called 3 other friends. Every single one had received an invite with the same error. I dialed my mother. "Oh, sweetheart," Delora said, her voice all sighs and silk. "It must have been a printing error. These things happen, but it's too late to fix them now. The envelopes are already sealed. You found a typo in Garrett's middle name within 2 hours and reordered the entire set," I replied. There was a pause. Then, "This is different." No, it wasn't. It was deliberate. Later that evening, I sat on the floor with the box of leftover invitations. I pulled them out, one by one. Lena, Lena, Lena. The name repeated itself like a glitch in a broken memory. They didn't forget who I was. They rewrote me. Somewhere between cup 12 and 13, I closed the box. I walked to my wedding planning binder and flipped open the first page. In thick black marker, I wrote, "If they can rename me in print, they're not done yet." Then my phone buzzed. New email. Subject line, "Final floral decision." From Seraphine. Again. 4 days before the wedding, Seraphine invited me over to her high-rise for what she called a casual menu and gift preview. That was her new thing, rebranding manipulation as celebration. "Just a little get-together, nothing formal," she said over the phone, as if we hadn't been quietly at war for weeks. Her condo sat above downtown San Diego, like it belonged to someone more important than she was. The view was breathtaking, of course, all harbor shimmer and glass towers, but the energy inside felt staged. Blush and gold accents covered every surface, ribbons, floral runners, little acrylic nameplates, and not one element matched what I'd chosen for the wedding aesthetic. At the far end of the dinner table, I spotted my nameplate. It read Aileen Riva, but was tucked next to an empty chair, like I'd been placed on the margin of my own story. The others were already there. Delora, sipping Chardonnay, Ophélie glancing at her watch, and Seraphine perched like she'd been born in stilettos. As I approached, Seraphine smiled with her trademark sharp sweetness. "You look radiant," she said. "I hope you don't mind. We made some executive adjustments since you've been so busy." I said nothing, just took my seat. They began discussing the flow of the rehearsal. Ophélie rattled off the timing, while Delora nodded. Then Seraphine leaned back and crossed her legs, just enough to get everyone's attention. "Honestly, I think it's amazing that Garrett can afford couture," she said, but that dress still feels aspirational, not achievable, don't you think? Delora didn't miss a beat. Sweetheart, we're practical people. We don't need to look like royal weddings from tabloids. I didn't flinch. They wanted to paint me as someone pretending, as if I had borrowed my entire life, including the man I loved and the clothes I wore. I leaned in slightly, not to whisper, but to make sure no one could claim they misheard me. Funny, I said. I thought elegance had nothing to do with birthright. For the first time in years, they didn't have a comeback. Silence stretched too long. A single beat passed, and I smiled. Not a smile to charm, one to document. As the tension lingered, a man from the bakery entered, carrying a large white box. "Cake delivery for tasting," he announced. I sat up straighter. I hadn't been told there would be cake today. Seraphine clapped her hands like a giddy child. "We figured it'd be nice to surprise you." The man lifted the lid, and there it was. A 4-tiered monstrosity of full fondant, dyed pink with edible glitter. The exact opposite of the floral, semi-naked cake I had ordered. My choice had been soft, understated, made with real ingredients: lavender, lemon, pressed blossoms. This thing looked like it belonged on a Vegas stage. "We thought this matched the theme better," Seraphine said. "The other one felt too farm to table." Ophelie giggled behind her glass. Delora smiled into her napkin. I stared at the cake. And then I did nothing. No fury, no tears. If they wanted to provoke me, they had underestimated just how still I could be when I was recording everything. Because at this point, I wasn't trying to salvage anything. I was gathering material. After I left, I drove home in silence. The city lights blurred through my windshield, and I kept my hands steady at 10 and 2. Back in my apartment, I didn't bother to change out of my clothes. I sat at the dining table, opened my laptop, and began typing. Subject line: New rule. All future visual and vendor decisions are to be cleared through me. Failure to do so will result in immediate cancellation. No emojis, no soft tone, just fact. I blind copied Garrett. Then I printed the email and pinned it on the corkboard above my desk. I didn't care if they rolled their eyes. They would read it. Later, Garrett came home from a meeting. He read the email without saying a word. Then he looked at me, nodded once, and said, "You don't need to fight them all at once. Just make them uncomfortable enough to back away." I checked my planner. Tomorrow was my final dress fitting. I whispered to myself as I flipped the page. Let's see what else they've touched. The boutique in La Jolla always smelled like something between clean linen and confidence. It was the kind of place where the glass didn't smudge, where the staff whispered instead of spoke, where every wedding dress lived under soft light like museum pieces. I arrived 5 minutes early for my final fitting, unaccompanied by choice. Garrett had offered to come. I told him no. I needed this one moment to myself. When I walked in, the receptionist smiled too quickly. "Your sister dropped something off earlier," she said. I froze halfway to the dressing room. "What was it?" "Just said it was coffee for you. It's in the suite already." My stomach knotted. I thanked her and walked slower than usual, past the displays, past the mannequins dressed in tulle and silence. When I reached the private suite, the coffee cup was sitting neatly on the side table, lid closed, steam long gone. I didn't touch it. I stepped into the dress. The seamstress zipped me up, stepping back with a soft sigh. "Perfect," she whispered, as she adjusted the lace near my collarbone. Then the door opened. Seraphine. Smiling. Holding a second cup. "Couldn't miss your last fitting," she said cheerfully. "Thought you might want real caffeine. That boutique blend is garbage." She walked over, deliberate steps and expensive heels, and held out the cup. I didn't move to take it. She looked down at the hem of the dress, nodded approvingly. "You really should have gone with satin," she said, and then her hand slipped. The cup tilted. A stream of deep red splashed onto the bottom third of the gown. Not coffee. Wine. "Oh, no," she gasped, hand to mouth. I thought this was the coffee." The room froze. The seamstress choked out something I didn't hear. My pulse roared in my ears. I stepped back, slowly, like the floor was glass. "It's fine," I said, voice level. "I just need a minute." In the restroom, I looked at myself in the mirror. My reflection didn't blink, didn't flinch. The woman staring back didn't look like she'd just been humiliated. She looked done. "They keep daring me to lose control," I whispered, "but I won't give them the satisfaction." The boutique arranged a pickup for emergency cleaning. I left before Seraphine could deliver another smile. Later that afternoon, I walked past the valet line in front of Seraphine's building. She was standing beside a black SUV, laughing with someone in a floral shirt. Her arms were full, binders, color charts, a clipboard. I paused just behind the glass doors. A staff member approached Seraphine with a tablet. "Miss Dorr, the rental company confirmed your selections for the flower arch. They'll arrive early on Friday." Seraphine didn't correct her. Inside the lobby, Ophelia stood by the elevator. She caught my eye. Her smile flickered like a faulty light. I said nothing. But that night, I did something. I logged into the planning portal, changed every password, then sent one email to all vendors. "Please remove Seraphine Dorr's access from all accounts, effective immediately." I didn't sign it with warmth, just my name. Garrett saw the message. He didn't ask questions. "I don't need to fight her anymore," I told him. "I just need to record everything." He nodded. That was the first time he looked scared. Around 10, my phone buzzed. It was the dry cleaner. "We just started the treatment," she said. "But you should know. The stain soaked through the second layer, like it was poured, not spilled." I didn't gasp, didn't curse. I exhaled slowly, letting the weight of the confirmation settle where the rage used to live. "This wasn't sabotage," I said quietly. "This was war." The apartment was quiet again, but not in a comforting way. More like the air was waiting for something. It was just past midnight, and the wine stain on my dress still lingered in my memory, like an accusation I hadn't yet responded to. I sat on the couch, legs tucked beneath me, a blanket draped over my shoulders that didn't quite reach the chill under my skin. I hadn't spoken to anyone since the boutique incident. Garrett had given me space without asking questions, which was the most supportive thing he could have done. I reached for the cedar box tucked under my bookshelf, the one I hadn't opened since my grandmother's funeral. It still carried the faint scent of her, rose water, lavender, and old books. Inside was a stack of letters, but one sat on top in an envelope with my name written in her handwriting. Aileen, in a graceful cursive that never wavered. I opened it slowly. "You have nothing to prove to those who want you small," it began. She wrote about how the women in our family had always survived by being quieter than the men, more polished than the competition, and more agreeable than the truth. She told me she saw something different in me. Stubbornness mistaken for defiance, quietness mistaken for weakness. "It's not your job to make them comfortable," she'd written. "It's your right to be complete." My throat tightened, but I didn't cry. It wasn't that kind of letter. It wasn't comfort. It was a mirror, held up at the exact moment I needed to see what I looked like when I stopped apologizing. I folded it back, gently, and sat still for a long time. The next morning, I got a call from Ophelia. She wanted to have coffee, said it was just us, like that was a privilege. I agreed. The house was clean in the way that made you feel unwelcome. The windows were too clear, the pillows too fluffed. I sat at the breakfast bar while she sliced strawberries with the kind of slow, deliberate motion that made you forget fruit could bruise. She smiled without looking up. "You ever wonder why someone like Garrett marries someone like you?" I didn't blink. I didn't look at my mother, who stood by the sink pretending not to hear. I didn't take the bait. "No," I said, "but I do wonder why people like you can't keep men around unless they're someone else's." Ophelie's knife paused just slightly against the cutting board. She laughed too quickly. You always were sharp when you let yourself be. I stood, tucked the stool back in quietly. I didn't let myself be. I decided. Then I left. On the drive home, I pulled over at a gas station and typed out a message to the entire vendor team. Effective immediately, only my voice or Garrett's is to be acknowledged in all final decisions. Any deviation will be considered a breach of contract. I scheduled the message to send at noon. When I got back to my apartment, I wrote another note by hand, folded it into an envelope, and drove back to my mother's. I didn't ring the bell, just slid the envelope under the front door. If you can't walk beside me at the altar, don't bother watching from the pews. Back home, I poured myself a glass of water, then picked up my grandmother's letter again. As I turned it over, a second slip of paper fell out, tucked into the fold. It was shorter, only one line in her slanted cursive. The key is yours. They know it. That's why they fear you. The ballroom in downtown San Diego was everything Seraphine would have wanted. Vaulted ceilings, chandeliers dimmed to just the right level of golden, chairs covered in ivory silk. It was flawless, sterile, a celebration dressed as a performance. I walked in wearing a navy sheath dress that Garrett said made me look like I'd already won something. I didn't feel victorious, but I felt prepared. For what? I wasn't entirely sure. Delora greeted me with her best mother of the bride smile. Her hands didn't touch mine. Her voice carried no warmth. So glad you could join us tonight, sweetheart. At the head table, Seraphine stood as if she owned the stage. She looked me over once and offered a brief nod, as if I were a guest. Dinner moved along predictably. Laughter, toasts, too many clinks of glasses meant to distract from the undercurrent. I kept a fork in my hand and my expression neutral. I counted the times my name was spoken aloud. Once. Then came the slideshow. The lights dimmed. The screen flickered. A soft piano piece played in the background, a custom medley Garrett and I had chosen months ago. Photos began to fade in. Family vacations, school plays, birthdays. Seraphine. Always Seraphine. In the center. Smiling, staged, spotlighted. I showed up once. Out of focus. Behind someone else's shoulder. The whispers started near the dessert table. I thought this was her wedding. Garrett looked over at me, his brow tightening. I didn't move. I didn't ask questions. I didn't cry. But I whispered internally, over and over. They didn't just minimize me. They erased me. The screen went black. Lights came up. The MC tapped the microphone. And now, a few words from the bride. I stood slowly, notes folded in my hand, ready to speak. But the MC continued. She's asked me to read on her behalf. I froze mid-step. I never asked that. I opened my mouth to speak, but he was already reading. The words that followed weren't mine. Not in tone, not in message. They were cotton candy fluff, laced with passive gratitude and sugar-coated humility. They sounded like someone trying not to offend a room they didn't choose. Garrett's hand found mine beneath the table. He squeezed, a quiet show of solidarity. I sat and listened to someone else speak in my place. With my name. At my own rehearsal. They'd taken my voice. After dinner, I slipped out. No goodbyes. Outside, the city hummed like it knew a secret. I found a quiet corner behind the valet station and opened my phone. My original speech sat untouched in my drafts. I stared at it for a long time, then deleted it. In its place, I opened a blank note. They gave me their version of my voice, I typed. I'm taking it back. I walked to the curb, flagged a rideshare, and climbed in. Halfway home, my phone buzzed. A text. From the venue tech. Hi, Aileen. Just confirming. Should we restore your original slideshow for tomorrow? Found this backup file in our archive. Attached was a file name. AileenFullFinal.move. I stared at it, then smiled for the first time that night. They tried to bury me under someone else's script. I decided to rewrite the whole scene. The courtyard was still, the kind of stillness that hums beneath your ribs. Just past 10 in the morning, the sun stretched long shadows across the stone walkway, making the estate feel like it had been frozen in some timeless expectation. I arrived early, not because I was excited, because I needed the silence before the show began. The staff was already bustling, folding napkins, adjusting floral centerpieces, blush and gold again, everywhere. I walked the perimeter slowly, breathing with intention. Every step a rehearsal for control. I'd learned by now that this day wasn't about joy. It was about endurance. As I approached the seating chart, a gilded frame displayed each name with calligraphy worthy of a wedding magazine. My fingers traced down the list of VIP table assignments until they stopped at one name, Ethan R. I blinked, then blinked again. No title, no explanation, just Ethan R. My ex-boyfriend from nearly 5 years ago, sitting at the table reserved for my closest circle. I turned to the planner, who had been rearranging programs nearby. "Why is Ethan Robinson seated at the VIP table?" I asked evenly. She looked startled, almost like she'd been waiting for this moment. "Your sister sent a revised list earlier this week. She said it was a surprise for you." It always was. I didn't argue. I didn't even nod. I turned and walked toward the reception area. Sure enough, there he was. Perfectly styled, leaning casually against the drink station, chatting with my cousin like we were all just reliving sophomore year. When his eyes met mine, he smirked. "Didn't think I'd get an invite," he said. "Seraphine insisted you'd want to see I'm doing well." I looked him up and down once, slow. "You're not the surprise today." He raised his brows, clearly expecting more. I left him standing there. As I headed toward the bridal suite, a young usher tapped my shoulder. He couldn't have been older than 16, cheeks still red from running across the property. "Miss Riva, someone asked me to give this to you." He handed me a small cream envelope. No name on the front, no seal. Inside were printed screenshots, group messages, names attached, Seraphine, Ethan. "Flirt, make it awkward." She needs to be humbled before she walks down the aisle. And a final message. "She always thinks she's above us. Let's knock her back where she belongs." A smaller note was clipped to the back. "You deserve to know what they planned." No signature. I folded the papers once, then again. No emotion on my face, just breath, just action. Instead of heading to the suite, I walked straight to the control booth. The tech guy looked surprised to see me, headphones half on. "I need to make a change to the playlist," I said. He blinked. "The sister approved it already." I handed him the phone. "Unapprove it." He scanned the new list I'd pulled from my bag. "We'll have it up within 15, he replied, eyes shifting. 10, I said. "This isn't a suggestion." Then I walked away. Back outside, guests had started to trickle in. I didn't greet anyone. I sent one text to Garrett. "Whatever happens, stay at my side. No speeches, no smiles unless I lead." He responded with a single heart emoji. No words, just presence. In the suite, I stood before the mirror and looked at the dress. The hem now slightly shorter than intended, thanks to Seraphine's sabotage. The stain, faded but remembered. I touched the bodice gently, then whispered, "This dress may be torn, but I stitched the seams myself." My phone buzzed. A message from security. "The estate gates just opened. Mr. Hoyle is here." Perfect. I wasn't walking into a wedding. I was walking into a battlefield, with the veil as my banner. The heat of midday didn't feel celebratory. It felt confrontational. The sun poured over the estate's garden like a spotlight, unrelenting and absolute. Guests had taken their seats. The string quartet played something serene and forgettable. My name wasn't on their lips, not yet. I stepped into view from behind the archway. The dress, rehemmed, corrected, reclaimed, moved with me. Each footstep was measured, not hesitant. They watched, but I didn't look at them. I kept my gaze locked on the altar until I passed the first row. That's when I saw it. My reserved seat, a plaque, A name. Mrs. Wrong. I stopped. Not dramatically, just long enough for the offense to register. A few heads turned, a couple whispers floated. The officiant looked up, then toward the planner, confused. Seraphine stood nearby in the second row, arms crossed, a flicker of amusement dancing at the corners of her mouth. I took a pen from my clutch, black ink, not for panic, for punctuation. In one motion, I crossed out wrong and wrote Hoyle. Then I sat. No one moved for several seconds. Then the music resumed. Guests shifted uncomfortably, unsure if they should pretend nothing had happened or acknowledge everything that just had. The ceremony began, but not before the next twist. Across the aisle, behind the last row of guests, Seraphine stood. She wasn't seated like everyone else. She was visible, positioned. She was wearing white, not bridal white, a cocktail dress, fitted, sleek, and unmistakably built on the design I'd originally chosen for myself, before she had revised it through a dozen backdoor conversations with vendors. My original sketch shortened, my lace pattern mimicked. Even the neckline, one I'd handpicked after weeks of fittings, reappeared in her copy. It was subtle theft, but it screamed. I watched a guest lean toward their partner and murmur, "Wait, isn't that the bride's original sketch?" Another followed. "I thought only the bride wore white." But Seraphine didn't blink. She stood there as if daring me to acknowledge her, as if she was claiming a different kind of spotlight, and I didn't give it to her. When the officiant gestured for me to speak, I stepped forward and gently tapped the microphone. But I didn't speak. I let the silence sit long enough for discomfort to build, like dust on glass, visible only when you shine light straight through it. And then I smiled. Not the polite kind, the kind that says, "You played your hand too early." Garrett leaned in. "They think this was the moment," he whispered. Eyes forward, lips steady, I answered. "It wasn't. That comes next." The brunch was being billed as a celebration, a thank you gathering to honor everyone who helped bring the day together. That was the phrasing on the sign at the entrance of the estate's private hall, set against a wall of hydrangeas and framed in the same blush gold palette that haunted every detail of this wedding. They'd even included the phrase in the programs. Seraphine stood near the front, laughing, clinking glasses, greeting people like a bride. Garrett and I arrived together, but I let him enter first while I lingered at the door. I wanted to see it as they did, from the outside. Laughter, the performative kind. Conversations that quieted when someone unfamiliar walked past. Plates clinking too loudly. People pretending to be proud of a moment they did everything to dismantle. I stepped inside. Nobody rushed over. I watched my cousin hand out copies of what looked like a printed booklet. The title, Clarkston Family Chronicle, Celebrating Love. I didn't recognize the cover photo, Seraphine in front of a floral arch. When I opened it, I found what they had carefully crafted. On page 22, there was a paragraph mentioning my wedding. One paragraph, no photo, no quote. Below that, in bold, seeing it come together felt like destiny. Seraphine Dorr, event coordinator. I looked up. Delora was approaching, holding a mimosa like a shield. Her eyes did that squinting thing she used when pretending to be sympathetic. "We couldn't get the print updated in time, honey. You know how deadlines are." I turned the page once, back to the quote. "So you printed the lie first." She blinked, didn't argue. Across the room, Garrett rose from his seat. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "We've been quiet long enough," he said. Every head turned. He didn't wait for their permission. He walked to the front, placed a stack of documents on the nearest table, and held one page up. "Meet my wife, not just the woman you saw in a dress yesterday, but the woman I trusted with 10% of Hoyle Holdings before she ever said, 'I do.'" Gasps rippled through the room. "She didn't marry into this name," he continued. "She helped shape it. While you all played politics, she built legacy." He handed a copy of the contract to Delora, another to Seraphine. You thought she was just a +1 in her own life. Turns out she's the headline. Garrett turned to me. His nod was small but certain. I didn't smile. I breathed. There wasn't a single clap in the room, just stunned faces and a silence so thick it wrapped around the walls like fog. I stepped forward, not to gloat, but to finish. They wanted a storybook wedding, I said. I gave them an epilogue. Afterward, while people milled around trying to recover, a server came over and handed me a leftover copy of the family chronicle. Someone left this on your chair, she said. I took it, opened to the same wedding page. Then, with a pen from my clutch, I wrote in the margin, "Footnote, you missed the headline." I closed it, stood, and handed it to the photographer. Archive this one. When your name is written out of the story, you write it back in. With ink they can't erase. A week had passed. Not rushed, not quiet. Just still in a way I hadn't known before. I woke in our apartment, sunlight cutting across the kitchen counter, like a silent invitation. Garrett was already gone, his coffee mug still warm on the sink. I poured mine slowly, watching the steam rise and curl like a secret only I needed to understand. No phone calls, no text threads lit up with apologies, no Seraphine, no Delora, no Ophelie. It was the first silence I welcomed. I sat on the balcony with my coffee, looking out toward the ocean, the tide pulling and returning like breath. My phone buzzed twice that morning, a missed call from a number labeled Family Home. I didn't return it. Instead, I opened my inbox. 4 unread messages. One from an aunt I hadn't heard from in years. "It's all just a misunderstanding. You know how weddings bring out the worst." Another from my mother, voicemail only. "You always take things so personally, Aileen." Seraphine had posted a story the night before, a blurred photo of her bouquet with the caption, "Family, complicated, but still family." That's what they did. Rewrote endings when they lost control of the plot. They weren't sorry for what they did. They were sorry I didn't let it work. I closed my phone, opened the real estate listings Garrett had sent the night before. One home had my name already on the contract. My full name. The one they tried to edit out of programs, photos, table cards. Garrett came back from his run, kissed the top of my head, said nothing. Just opened his laptop beside me like we'd done this for years. And maybe we had. Survived storms by building our own weather system. I stood and walked to the hallway, pulled the letter from the frame. My grandmother's words now sat behind glass. "You have nothing to prove to those who want you small." That frame went on our hallway wall. Right below it, I pinned a photo. The only one I saved from the wedding. It was of me walking away, veil trailing like a cape, wind bending the fabric, my spine straight. I deleted the planning folder that day. Didn't just remove it from the drive, I erased every backup copy. No more spreadsheets, no timelines, no guest lists. That version of the wedding didn't deserve to survive. That night, Garrett and I sat on the floor, eating leftovers. The room was quiet but full. He looked at me after a long silence. "Think they'll ever try to come back?" I took another bite, let the question sit like the steam from my mug that morning. "Let them," I said, "but I won't be waiting in the same place." He smiled, but said nothing. As I stood to put away the dishes, my phone lit up again. Unknown number. I didn't flinch. When you stop needing closure, you finally create your own. 2 weeks later, I walked into the same estate, under different lights. This time, it was mine. Our public vow renewal, a charity gala Garrett and I had chosen to host in place of a second honeymoon. A statement of values, of ownership, of control. I wore navy satin, clean lines, sharp neckline, no veil. Garrett walked 2 steps behind, not out of tradition, but because that's how we decided. The press was already circling the entrance. Questions floated like perfume. "How does it feel to be back?" "Do you consider this closure?" I smiled but didn't answer. Inside, it was all spectacle, chandeliers, signature cocktails, even a photo wall with the Hoyles Building Legacy embossed in gold. Seraphine stood near the bar, posing too long with someone from a lifestyle blog. Delora flitted between small groups, retelling the wedding story like she hadn't choked on her own pride that day. Then she took the mic. We wanted to take a moment to recognize someone who made this night possible. I didn't move. Delora turned toward Seraphine, smiled warmly, and lifted a velvet box from behind the podium. For your impeccable vision and dedication to family tradition. Gasps, claps, confused murmurs. Seraphine opened the box slowly. Inside sat a vintage locket. Gold, oval, carved at the edges. My grandmother's. I didn't walk. I glided. To the stage. Took the mic from Delora with 2 fingers. That locket, I said, voice steady, was left to me in her will. Not you. Not your favorite. I opened a folder from my clutch, pulling out a notarized document. I brought proof, but really, I shouldn't have needed to. The room hushed. Cameras stopped clicking. I placed the paper on the table, turned to the crowd. Then the lights dimmed, flickered, and the AV system, already scheduled by me 3 days ago, cued the wrong file. The one labeled Slideshow Final, but it wasn't the family version. It was mine. The screen lit up behind me with real memories. Grandma in the kitchen, Garrett and I dancing in the dark of our living room, my real dress design, the one they had buried. Then the voiceover played. My original vow speech. Not the MC version, not the one Seraphine had tried to overwrite, but mine. It ended with a frame. White background, black text. You tried to edit me out, but I saved the master file. When the lights returned, Seraphine stood frozen. Delora looked at the locket like it had turned to ash. I picked up the mic again. Tonight isn't about revenge, I said. It's about recognition. And the woman you all dismissed just took the mic back, permanently. I walked off stage. Garrett met me halfway, hand already waiting. Back home, I placed the locket beside my grandmother's letter, in the same glass frame. Above it, I wrote one final phrase on a sticky note. I didn't burn bridges. I just lit a better path. My phone buzzed. 3 press requests. I put it on silent and walked to the window, the ocean stretching wide beyond the balcony. The next chapter wasn't something they could write or edit.